And the bubble nebula is a cloud of helium. Now, of course, they're perplexed as to why the star of origin, they had a supernova, is not centered symmetrically in this bubble, but we all know that explosions and collisions aren't symmetrical. Okay, guys, we've proven it. They're all liars. Anybody who says Planet X doesn't exist, this is from the initial argument that it would be changing all the planets in the solar system if it was real. Here is just a scratch of the evidence. You guys tune into some of these. People who say that the planets aren't changing will never talk about spectrometry data, which is the easiest way to tell if something's changing in a planet's atmosphere. We used 5th grade science to do spectronomy on the sun and determine the composition of the sun. And look at this, May 14, 16, 17, we get one little solar storm after another, and look at little smoothed out double humps of helium. But folks, we've been measuring this wind since the 90s, since Pioneer. A famous astronomer said that if this, they thought it was a supernova helium, like the helium bubble that Hubble took a picture of, but it's not. These are coronal mass ejections of helium, and look, they're correlating it to temperature changes in the Earth's atmosphere. They've been doing that since 1999. They even measured the dust coming from this iron oxide rich atmosphere of this stupid brown dwarf fragment. And it's coming in, this dust isn't everywhere, it's coming in from one direction. It was hard to throw all this data on the binary star. It's hard to have brought all this public record data to the forefront because of the way it was shielded and described by the professionals. It was described as a bubble or an energy cloud or interstellar, not interplanetary. And some people did put it together, and this is a remarkable finding. This is how old this data is from Pioneer and Voyager. This shows you a direct correlation between the temperature of the atmosphere, which is highly subjective, I admit, and the second sun. There's its wind right there. And you can see an increasing trend. And there are articles written by these people who studied the interstellar medium and said that the interstellar dust could double. And this is the dust article. So they're finding interstellar dust coming from one direction. Helium, nucleons, right here, they're measuring them for you. Okay, coming from one direction. Plasma coming from one direction. There's a second solar system out there. Now, check out this excerpt from an article written about the data obtained from Pioneer and Voyager. So this is an old article, and it's so true today. It proved what we were trying to prove. The terrestrial tropospheric temperature is affected by the cosmic radiation. And it's not so much the helium, it's the radiation coming off the helium. The solar wind collides right there. It says it. And it tells you how it displaces everything. It's an amazing, amazing article. Now, listen to this. This is amazing. This is what they concluded from Pioneer and Voyager data. In the termination shock, the electrons and nucleons, which is plasma, I mean, right? You can't have a sun without plasma. The incoming electrons and nucleons of the interplanetary cosmic rays penetrate upstream into the solar system through the waves and elude the turbulences that take place. The intergalactic nucleons with a low density of energy do not penetrate the solar system but are deviated. They're easily deviated because of their low energies and low densities by the magnetic turbulences and the bow shock and the pressure from the outward flow of the solar wind and the solar magnetic field. The slow particles that have high energy densities or are hotter, they have a more, and you know this, they have a different spin and they have a slight magnetic polarity to them. And they go upstream. I mean, they're calling this wind upstream and downstream, incoming and outgoing. They're calling it electrons and nucleons, which is hydrogen and helium. Okay, they're talking about one thing, plasma, are they not? The plasma again, the cosmic rays are cooled again in the voids inside the terminal shock zone. They reaccelerate, amazingly enough, reaching supersonic speeds of 400 kilometers per second, which travel past and by the sun in the opposite direction of the outgoing solar wind. Are you kidding me? So they're being drawn in by the magnetic field and the gravity of the sun. And then that was the data that was corroborated through Ulysses. We did not find the Ulysses data because it really wasn't out there. It was disguised. And Ulysses confirmed that this solar wind is increasing. And then the other satellites near Saturn have now started to pick up the solar dust, saying that's been increasing. And all people that say that an interstellar medium of really high dense dust, really high dense helium could spell disaster. Now these incoming cosmic nucleons hit the Earth's magnetic field. The collision of those particles in the bow shock promotes the formation of clouds. Now, the electrons have a hard time making it to the ground, but as the article and all those graphs show, the cosmic rays are now influencing the temperature of the Earth. So we are getting double whammied. We are getting hit by cosmic rays that are getting through because they're neutral and can't be redirected, but they're still hot. And so now we have all this cosmic radiation coming in from the soft background radiation, and now we have, the particle interaction, and now we have the helium getting through, and that is disastrous. It's triggered a ton of methane, which now has made the problem even worse, and they're desperately fighting true global cataclysm. So what are you going to do? Sit back and do nothing? Pretend like you know how it's going to play out? That's your prerogative. But if you got children, your best bet is to try.
You've just entered the theater of an alien sky. If the words and images seem strange to you, there's a reason for this. Our world was once a vastly different place. To experience this won't hurt you, and there is nothing to fear. Of all the mistaken perceptions about the origins of ancient myths and symbols, it's the creation story that we've most profoundly misunderstood. The popular assumption is that the creation myths are simply wild guesses about the beginning of the universe, how the sun and moon appeared, the stars, distant planets, and a landscape inhabited by multitudes of living creatures, all leading to a culminating appearance of our primal ancestors. In truth, the creation tales describe a visible, metamorphosing formation in the sky. But the events could only be remembered through imaginative human interpretations, and over time, imagination itself would progressively obscure the original experience. Nevertheless, the sweeping impact of creation accounts on cultural history could hardly be overstated, since every ancient temple, every city, every kingdom was founded as a reenactment of the original creation story. As we bring the mythic content into a comparative study, the underlying patterns will stand out. First, the cloud of undifferentiated chaos. Then the emergence or clarification of a vast sphere called heaven when heaven was close to the earth. Then the differentiation of male and female aspects in conjunction as a central eye, heart, or soul, the primeval seed of creation. The archetypal Venus goddess was seen as the eye, but much more as well. And by this interpretation, the Martian warrior figure was the pupil of the eye. Many variations on the creation theme connect the central eye with an emerging triangular form interpreted as the visible name of the Creator himself. Then, erupting from the triangular form, a heaven-shattering explosion, remembered as the terrifying glory, a visible, reverberating shout announcing the active phases of creation. The symbols of this violent discharge converge globally, always conveying the idea of radiating fire and light, producing a sea of luminous ejecta, the primeval matter, or raw material of creation. The explosive outflow gave the appearance of protection around an invulnerable spot, the location of the warrior god, the celestial prototype of the warrior king on Earth. The symbolism is universal and found its broadest expression in the radiant crown of kings. The crown signified the primeval glory, the centerpiece of creation mythology, and for the same reason it meant the conjunction or marriage of the king and the goddess. Such was the original character of the mother goddess as Great Star, the radiant dwelling, protectress, and crown of the warrior god. We'll follow the creation symbolism up to and through the unraveling of the planetary configuration into the complex phases of restabilization, cosmic renewal, and the departure of the gods. The events were not just seen and heard, but encoded the world over in magical practices, in kingship rites, in New Year's festivals, and yes, even in ritual sacrifice and the great wars of conquest and nationalistic expansion. But what was the role of the overarching creator figure in all of this? The paradox of a mythic creator and displaced god will be the subject of our next discourse. How could ancient myths and symbols count as real evidence for cosmic events in the past? No one should be asked to believe a mythic story, but common patterns around the world must have an explanation. Of course, every myth involves human imagination and interpretation, which is why over time the word myth came to mean make-believe, not true. Our role is to identify the provocation in natural experience, which is an entirely different matter. That does not require us to believe any story in the form it's come down to us. To find the underlying events, we work with the cross-cultural, often global, convergence of human memories. In particular, the convergences on unique details that would not be possible in the absence of a shared experience. The dragons of human imagination did not exist as such. But why would we choose to ignore the extraordinary events that are required to explain the global similarities? So we sift through the stories and we find innumerable descriptions of a frightful chaos monster, most often described in serpentine or dragon-like form. We follow the theme back to its first recorded expressions, and to our surprise, we discover that these mythic creatures were originally cosmic. Only in later times were they localized geographically through regional storytelling. That gives us the beginnings of an explanation of a global theme, an archetype. As we expand our field of view, it becomes increasingly clear that extraordinary natural events, acting on human imagination perhaps 5,000 years ago, produced an explosion of storytelling. Of course, world mythology cannot be true in the interpretive terms that the myths are anciently transmitted to us. No fiery serpents in the sky, no terrestrial mountain reaching to the center of heaven, no living being in the sky appearing as a motionless sun. But such myths are global. The mother goddess Venus, the ancestral warrior Mars. Yes, these are myths, but Venus as goddess and Mars as warrior are global archetypes. That's where the challenge lies. Don't believe in accidents. Mars does not look masculine, Venus does not look feminine, but these planetary associations are worldwide, and there has to be an explanation. The mythic themes did not arise from any natural experience today, but what about a provocation in an earlier time? No natural phenomenon we experience today could possibly have inspired the detailed tapestry of world mythology. That's why deliberate attention to recurrent themes is so essential, and that means penetrating to the experiential substructure of global storytelling. We must always ask, what concrete experience is required to produce the worldwide themes? Themes recorded with different words and different symbols and different sacred practices, all pointing back to one phenomenal experience. You cannot get the coherence of archetypal mythology by making things up. Make-believe will not create a global story of a former central sun prior to the present sun, but the idea is worldwide. You have to follow this investigation to grasp the power of converging testimony, just as any good detective would do. All of the mythic archetypes are inseparably connected to each other. There is not a single global theme that stands in isolation from the other themes. Hundreds of cross-cultural themes are all part of the tapestry of world mythology. Of course, the surface of storytelling is cluttered with localized contradictions, but there is a discernible substructure that is entirely unified. It's this substructure of human memory that assures us of a globally shared experience. The single requirement is that we hear the ancient witnesses, hear them sufficiently to recognize the common patterns, the unified substructure of human memory. And that's what our study of the ancient cultures is about. One story told around the world, fully coherent, directing our attention to a profound human experience that continues to echo around us in 1,000 different ways. Humanity can only be helped by bringing the human experience and the celestial provocation into the light of day.
Planet X passes through the solar system in a straight line, where the other planets are swept along in their orbits by sweeping arms coming from the sun. Planet X hops over these sweeping arms and thus develops a retrograde orbit in the manner the ancients recorded. What would stop the orbit of Earth from reversing, stopping, or drawing closer to Planet X? Orbits are living things, quickly reestablishing themselves if interrupted, and interruption does not spell doom. In December of 2003, when the Earth encountered Planet X in its orbit, it stopped. Orbits are not sacred, and this includes their speed as well as their location. As Planet X floated past the Sun, having slowed dramatically from its rapid rush into the solar system, it began to push the Earth back in its orbit. Planet X also was lifting from below the ecliptic, where it approached from the direction of the Orion constellation, to being positioned to pierce the ecliptic just prior to the pole shift. Meanwhile, it continued to move from the right to the left in its retrograde orbit. Venus and the dark twin also encounter the force of Planet X in their orbits and are blocked. Planet X is between the Sun and the Earth, which it holds in an eddy flow of particles coming round the backside of Planet X from the Sun. Venus and the dark twin are likewise caught in this cup. Venus is moved to simulate its orbit when viewed from Earth, just as the Earth's seasons are simulated by tilting the Earth. As Planet X continues in its straight-line path, creating a more violent wobble in the Earth and appearing more visible in the skies, it is also squeezing Venus toward the Earth to loom large. Planet X is within the orbit of Venus, and thus pressing Venus outward toward the Earth. The dark twin has been crowding up behind the Earth in their shared orbit. Meanwhile, the Earth has developed an extreme wobble. The Earth normally rotates around its geographic North Pole, but as the North Pole of Planet X is now pointed outward, away from the Sun's South Pole, the Earth has developed a drunken lurch to move its magnetic North Pole out of view, a twice-a-day polar wobble which rapidly evolves into a twirl. This wobble becomes worse as Planet X proceeds on its path, outbound from the solar system. What starts the process of the last weeks, with all their extreme gyrations, is a threshold being crossed. The dithering we have been describing, where Planet X, the Earth, and the other planets caught in the cup are all bouncing around, reacting to movement in another, to crowding of magnetons or other particles, reaches an explosive point. The dark twin prepares to move behind the Earth as they are squeezed in front of Planet X, and thence to escape by moving back into space behind the Earth, passing the Earth in their shared orbit. The dark twin escapes the cup, and the dance of many becomes a deadlock grip by Planet X on the Earth. Planet X is now pointing its magnetic North Pole directly at the Earth. If the years and months of the Earth wobble were the wrestlers positioning themselves at the edge of the mat, then the last weeks are full contact, and neither can let go of the other. When Venus and the dark twin begin to escape from the cup, the particle crowding is suddenly eased, allowing Planet X to come forward toward the Earth. The last weeks have begun. The Earth begins her rotation slowdown. It is during this time that the Earth is drawn toward Planet X, though the Earth will return to her orbit after the pole shift. When Planet X pierces the ecliptic, it is forced to throw its south pole upward, going into opposition along the Sun's magnetic flow lines above the ecliptic. Thus accommodating the Sun's magnetic field, Planet X is drawn closer in toward the Sun. Here it is in position to form the Zeta-Talk triangle, though the Earth has not yet been fully drawn toward planet X. The Earth now has fewer barriers between herself and planet X and is drawn closer by magnetic attraction. She travels 30 million miles closer to planet X. Rotation slowing to a stop occurs. Venus escapes the cup. Planet X continues its outbound path and starts to pull its North Pole up again, and this is the process that causes the pole shift for Earth, grabbing the South Pole of Earth and jerking it upward by 90 degrees. At this point, Planet X is starting to float over the head of the hapless Earth. Planet X is traveling rapidly out of the solar system. The wobble that starts the last weeks is a flinging back and forth of the North Pole of Earth. This severe wobble lasts for 9 days. The North Pole of Earth thus flings away when the magnetic North Pole of Earth comes up over the horizon and then rebounds back 12 hours later. The severe wobble, thus, will merely be an exaggeration of the existing wobble. Then the Earth assumes a static lean to the left for 4.5 days. Laying on her side, her magnetic North Pole pushes to the west, laying her hemispheres out for an equal basking under the sun. Then the Earth gradually slings her North Pole away for a 2.5-day progression toward the 3 days of darkness, then rolling further into the 6 days of sunrise west predicted in Islam. As Planet X continues in its retrograde orbit, its North Pole is no longer located to the left of the Earth, and the Earth adjusts by slinging its North Pole to the right. Thus, during the 6 days of sunrise west, the Earth has a lean to the right. Venus escapes the cup. The dark twin escapes the cup, and the dance of many becomes a deadlock grip by Planet X on the Earth. Then the Earth rights herself side by side with Planet X and begins her rotation slowdown for a period of 18 days. It is during this time that the Earth is drawn toward Planet X, so that Planet X quickly increases in size in the skies and is the writhing monster of legend. The Earth moans, groans, and complains as the core pulls at the crust, but the crust is gripped increasingly and held by Planet X. The slowing is a lurching matter, too, as when the Atlantic Rift is exposed, the grip slows the rotation, but when hidden, rotation tries to return. Emergency management teams are beyond exhaustion, government services in disarray, and travel has become almost impossible. The Earth slows in its rotation and actually stops. This is recorded in written history and spoken folklore worldwide as a long day or night. Rotation stops with the Atlantic Rift facing Planet X. Therefore, the long day described by Joshua and the long night described by the West Coast Indians. Rotation is stopped for 5.9 days. During this week, the size of the approaching Planet X horrifies those on the daylight side of the Earth. At first, a reddish blob, only a fraction of the size of the moon, it grows in size and appears to twist and turn like a dragon in the sky. The ancients recorded this as a fire dragon in the sky, as the tail of swirling moons gave this appearance. The North Pole of Planet X grabs the South Pole of Earth and tips the globe 90 degrees. After the passage, Planet X exits as quickly as it approached. The crust is dragged over minutes to a new location, along with the core. All told, the better part of an hour. Weak spots along the Earth's crustal plates give way. The Pacific Ocean will shorten and the Atlantic widen. Subducting plates will subduct greatly. Mountain building will occur suddenly. Rotation restarts, at first slowly, but then picking up speed until a day on planet Earth is much as it used to be. Just as rotation stops within a day, just so rotation returns within a day, much to the relief of the frantic survivors who fear the long day or night they have been experiencing will never end. Planet X tips the Earth by 90 degrees, catching and dragging the Earth's south pole along as it swings its north pole up on its way out of the solar system. The Earth's rotation had stopped with the Atlantic Rift facing Planet X in a magnetic grip, but Europe and Africa were still tugging to the east, and thus the Atlantic rips apart. The former North and South poles are now on the new equator. India has become the new South Pole. Africa tears away from the Mediterranean, tipping the Arabian Plate in the process. The crashing plates compress the Pacific and force the Himalayas over India. India and Western Australia drown, as does Indonesia. An inland bay rips into the Russian lands just to the east of the Ural Mountains. After the pole shift, the Earth begins rotating again. The Americas are strung out along the new equator. The ocean off the bulge of Brazil will become the North Pole. Alaska and Siberia, formerly frozen lands, will now be tropical. Europe and Africa are likewise now mostly tropical. Antarctica will melt and become habitable. The bulge of Brazil will lie on the new polar circle, but lands along the spine of the Andes will be temperate, as will the western United States. What was formerly India will become the new South Pole, with the lands nearby suddenly plunged into polar cold. Australia and New Zealand touch the new equator. But Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Tibet, southern China, and Southeast Asia will freeze, as will those who drown in what was formerly India. The world's most populous nations are thus at the greatest risk. Ice will form slowly over the new poles, giving survivors a chance to escape. Hypothermia will be their greatest enemy.